This week on the New to You show, False Starts, Part 4, The Adventures of Baron Munchausen.
Inside the mind, viewing from a distance, everything appears fine, but inside the mind, but inside the mind.
Welcome to the fourth installment of our topic, False Starts, on the New to You show, a water cooler show about recommendations, things that may not be new to the world, but maybe they're new to you, our listeners. All right, I'm getting so good at this.
Yeah, you tell everybody what the show's about.
I'm not going to undermine myself.
I totally
not
get
at
it.
all.
Myself being John Holt.
And myself being Keith Vincent.
And myself being Julian Cage.
And the best self, Katherine Scipione.
Our guest for the fourth episode of False Starts. False Starts, we've had a commercial failure and a...
They've all pretty much been commercial failures.
Yeah. Catherine's was a good choice for like failing to start, probably because of platform. It could have been a success elsewhere.
Maybe, I don't know the numbers behind that one.
Yeah. And then
it's not well documented.
And Jules's pick, I don't know if Iron Giant was, maybe promoted better. Who knows? Let's not get into that.
It was a commercial failure, without a doubt.
Yeah. It was also a failure of animation. There was just too much flat animation.
Yeah. What's the deal? Like, how come everything looked old and
I think it was a failure in marketing.
Didn't they know 2D's dead?
Yeah.
Man.
Nobody told them.
Yeah, they failed to market themselves that information. So,
what's new to you this week, John?
oh shoot. Oh yeah, before
You were supposed to think of something that's new to you.
So, I had it in my head, and it's newly gone, newly evaporated from my head. All right, so my new thing this week, we didn't just pause the recording at all to get that across. My new thing this week is that I am going to start working on soon another podcast, which may or may not be out by the time we record this, called Board Ghost, which will be a collaborative storytelling podcast. So that's kind of in the works, and we're working on it. The first collaborative game we're going to play is called Ribbon Drive, and the way you play that game is everyone makes a mixtape, and the conceit of the game is that you're all on a road trip together, and you bring your mixtapes to the game session, and you listen to the first track randomly from amongst the 4 mixtapes, and that track gives you a sense of roughly who you are, and also more importantly what your road trip is about. Like where you're going, what your goal is, etc. And then you listen to the second track, and that track gives you more specific details about who you are as players and your characters.
And so you're building a story.
Right. And then from there, you kind of just improv out scenes along the path of this road trip and explore the futures and goals of your characters in these scenes as you go, and keep listening to these mixtapes.
So it's like reliving your college years.
Yeah, exactly.
And what's the title?
Ribbon Drive. And the podcast where we're doing is Board Ghost, but Ribbon Drive is the name of the game.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Sweet.
It's like a collaborative storytelling thing. And
each person that makes their tape has the story already in their head, or it's kind of like, okay, well, we're randomly picking this one first with this track, so that's gonna
right.
Well, to find out, you'll have to listen.
Yeah, you could listen.
To Board Ghost.
Yeah, I think it's a collaborative game where you go.
I don't know. Sounds risky.
Where you each have, you have these tracks, these 4 playlists or whatever, these mixtapes, and you randomly decide with like a D4 or whatever randomizer you want to use which one you're going to do, and everyone has like the lyrics. You print out the lyrics for everybody, so you can just listen to the song and kind of get your impression of like what's happening, or actually look at the lyrics and pull meaning from the lyrics, and you can use that to inform what your path is about. So the example they gave was Modest Mouse track called Spitting Venom, I think it's called, where the story they pulled from that was that one of the people in this party has like a terminal illness, and there's in the lyrics is this little like they're spitting venom, and one of the lyrics in the thing is like made a deal with the devil or something like that. So their idea is that this mysterious stranger, which may have some sort of darker intent, gave them a map to where they may be able to find a cure. So they're road tripping to find a cure for their friend who has a terminal illness.
I like it. I'm in.
That's their story that they're playing. So
yeah, it's pretty
so
cool.
we're gonna see how that goes. And the rest of the podcast, I may pull some of you guys on as we go along in the path, but we'll each set of games, maybe 3 or 4 episodes long, and then we'll play a new game. So each game will be it'll be 30, 45 to hour-long episodes, 3 to 4 back-to-back over the course of a month. And that will be one whole game, one self-contained story. And then we'll move on to the next story maybe in a new game system.
Nice.
So that's what we're working on.
Congrats.
Yeah. Board Ghost, that's what it's called. That was a little masturbatory. I apologize.
How can we find that?
It's going to be at boardghost.com.
Oh, nice.
I thought it was gonna be like just
but
like
how
a
do you-
ghost who like didn't know, like was so
Right.
like didn't know what to do anymore, like wanted ideas.
Yeah, so that's the idea is you guys are all the ghosts, and we're here to entertain you, to
And
give
he's
you
like,
distractions.
He's like, I've been living forever.
And we're like, ghost, listen to new to you.
Here's something new that you can do.
Ghost.
So
But it's spelled not B-O-R-E-D.
it is B-O-R-D.
Oh, okay, great.
I have both.
I thought it was
Just in
board
case.
like board game.
I have
board.
that. I also
Oh.
have Board Toast. So if we ever, and this is the other show that
There's
maybe
a lot of options.
But how's that board spelled for board toast?
BOARD.
Oh, okay.
So with that one, I think we should make a show about, maybe it's a video series about cocktails and board games.
Okay.
Like playing
like
a board
toast.
game, and
Yeah.
you pair up
I
like
thought
a cocktail with it.
cooked bread.
So like we play Puerto Rico and have a rum cocktail,
Mm.
or we'd play some other game.
Clue
some
and we
other
drink
thing.
bourbon.
I
Yeah.
think you should definitely get Jesse in on this.
Pandemic, and we drink diseases and stuff
We drink diseases.
with alcohol.
I think it would be gin and
Wow.
tonics because that would prevent us from getting scurvy,
yeah.
which was a pandemic
there are
at one
tonics
point. Yeah,
too.
there you
It's
go.
a tonic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's enough of my self-flagellation.
I don't think that was.
I mean, it's
it's
not
new to you.
flagellation
It's something
either.
you're doing. It's something you're.
Yeah. So that's out there in the world. So who's left? Keith, it's you. And
Me,
your
I'm
pick.
left. I'm
All right,
left.
So Keith,
In
let's
fact,
roll
I'm
into
left-handed.
let's roll into your false start.
Let's do it.
Inside the mind. He wakes with that same lonely look on his face, plus a feeling of disgust.
From the director of Time Bandits and Brazil, a new movie full of noise.
Oh, hey. So this week,
Hey, ya.
the last couple of weeks we've been hearing things about false starts, and so I actually had this in mind right away when we came up with the concept of false start because most of the things have been kind of most of the subjects we've been covering have been considered somewhat of failures, and this movie is kind of notorious for it. But I love this movie, and I have since the very first time I've seen it. But it's called The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, directed by Terry Gilliam, came out in 1988. Written by Terry Gilliam and his writing partner, Charles McCowan, who is also one of the characters in the movie, who acts in it. But it came out in 1988. And it's just like a lot of these early Terry Gilliam movies where it's just like funded by 16 different sources. Who knows like what the real, it's got different distributors in different countries. It's like, it's this kind of like cobbled together financing situation that just ended up being a big monetary black hole, sadly. But we'll get into a little bit of that later, I suppose, when we talk about it. But it's a movie. It's actually quite hard to describe, other than it's just a whimsical joyride that deals with the concepts of storytelling and lying and where stories exist in history. I mean, what's the importance of telling stories in history? I think is kind of somewhat in there. I mean, it's hard to really put it. It's very hard to sum this movie up, other than it's just like some odd, weird adventures that happen to this guy. So it's based on an old collection of stories by a notorious liar who's a real guy named Baron Munchausen from Germany in the let's see what year?
1785.
And so this guy was just well known throughout these stories had been told for a long time, and this guy was just kind of like a well-known kind of teller of tall tales, and it was always these crazy adventures he was going on with his crazy companions, and so at some point Terry Gilliam was like, let's make that a movie, and he did, and it's just a really weird movie that is beautiful. That's one of the things that I would say first about this movie. I just think it's so lovingly made and so well crafted and so beautiful that even if you get lost or aren't interested in the kind of like loop-de-loops in the story that it pushes out, no. Even if you get lost in the kind of roller coaster of the story, then it's still worth it just because it's just so beautiful, and it's just like a really fun ride through this like really creatively built world. So it follows this kind of mythical, this kind of fake, this kind of like any battle Europe time period where it's just this unknown war against an unknown Turk in some seemingly French area, because specifically the Age of Reason, and the head of this town speaks in a French accent, and all of the uniforms seem to be French of that era, and it just follows this really surreal, whimsical storyline of this man who they're putting on a play about this guy, and then the real guy comes and tells the story, and he's old, and as they're telling the story, you see it actually come to life, and then he tells his side of the story, and it's slightly different, and there's just this neat interplay of what is the storytelling part versus what is really happening in the story, and does any of it actually even matter? So, and really that's kind of where it comes to at the end. But I do believe it's, I feel there are certain movies that I don't appreciate simply because they leave at the end. I feel like, but we didn't really go anywhere. And I guess there's a way that you could look at this story that seems like that, but I do feel like we went somewhere anyway. I guess a good example of that is like the movie The Master. I love it. It's a well-crafted movie, but at the end it just leaves me cold because I'm just like, there's not a beginning, a middle, and an end kind of. It just kind of just goes until it's over. That might be an argument for another day, but that's an example I'm using to say that this movie might seem like that, but I feel like it travels in such a way and tells just such cute little stories within itself that it wraps itself up quite nicely at the end. And I mean, it's just some of the funniest people in the history of filmmaking, I think, all working together on this just super bizarre thing. And I mean, there's plenty more to say about it, but I'm going to open it up to the people because I obviously like it. So I'm gonna say I'm gonna see what other people have to say. So is anybody?
No. We're being polite now.
Yeah.
To your point that it's a beautiful, just a beautiful set, beautiful scenery, all of that. That's super true. This is the first time I ever saw this movie, and it is zany.
Yeah.
This movie is so weird.
Yes.
But I will say, there's the opening scenes of like when they're narrating, putting on this play featuring this character of Baron Munchausen. Am I saying that right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then the real Baron comes in and enters the scene, and when they go into that foray of like now the real Baron is acting out and telling his story, the scenery the camera kind of like pans to this like now we're taking you away from the stage and into the real world.
But it's like such a fake real world of his storytelling, yeah.
Right, and it's just so beautiful and lush, and that was the point where I was watching the movie and I thought, yes, and here is the budget. This is where all the money was spent because it looks like $1 million.
But I will say too, though, before we even get there, when they're doing the stuff on the stage, and it's all this like interesting
Very
stage
intricate.
set craft, stagecraft from an old theater set. I think that stuff is so cool. In fact, I reference it often when I'm doing kind of like effects for animation because there's specifically the water. I've referenced their water trick lots of times in animation.
Well, that's what's crazy about the whole movie is it is very theatrical, and like everything is a lush set.
Yeah.
And everything you see is heavily stylized, and you can tell they had to build it all from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
But it not only is it I mean, it is like aesthetically pleasing, but it has this very specific quality. It's very muted kind of tones. Like it feels like it's of a specific time.
I think part of that is the reference. Like when you're looking at the very first scene as he pans across this like war-torn, it's a city under siege.
Yeah.
And it's like you said, it's an
any town,
right.
Europe. Yeah.
It's France, but it's also it's like a Russian town during a Turkish war, that sort of thing. So it's got this split, but it looks like a painting where you see these arches, and through the arches you see figures on planes that don't really exist.
Yeah.
Like they're built to get this shot that looks like a painting, and the tones of the camera, the tones that are captured on film, look like a painting aged to our time with the sootiness and sort of time appropriate and period appropriate look that you would capture in a painting of the time. And that is carried by the tone. And then when you get into the Baron's more fantastic Rococo, dreamscape, you get colors from a different style of painting.
Well, when he goes to the moon, you were talking about the opening shot where we see this like just prototypical European city. When he goes to the moon and they're having this parade, you can see like in contrast to that, just these flat panels of this beautifully painted town just going by. It just
and also the geometry is very like, again, it's like 16th or 17th or 18th century
star
style,
maps,
like star mapping and illustrations of geometry. Like who's that German printmaker?
Well, they're Gustave Dore.
Dore, yeah. There's a lot of Dore.
I think he's
reference.
French, but that one of the popular versions of the Munchausen stories were illustrated by Gustave. Is it Dore or
Dore?
I'm not certain how to pronounce it, but I think it's Gustave Dore. And they make reference to it, and they name one of the characters Gustavus. There's a lot of references
he's Gus
to things.
because he gusty and
blows, exactly. Yeah. But they make a lot of references to a bunch of different things in this.
There's a lot of Odyssey references in the movie. Like the dog is named after Odysseus's dog.
Yeah.
From or is it
the
he says
Odyssey.
Like, stay for me, stay, and I'll be back.
Yeah, and which is named after the boat from Jason and the Argonauts, the Argos. And his horse is named after Alexander the Great's horse, Bocephalus. So
there's
a lot of weird
fun. I mean,
in fact, I wish I
Terry Gilliam
knew
references.
more. In that, I bet you it's riddled with
rap.
even more. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about some of the different scenes that kind of like take place within the film, because it seems to me there was like 15-minute vignettes. There's like 8 or 9 kind of little vignette stories within
Almost
the story.
chapters. Yeah.
Absolutely. And at first, I'm not positive if I love that or if I hate it. I think it's both a good and bad thing about the film, because I do think that it went on a bit long. It was tough. It was tough for me to get engaged. I think the point that I got engaged in the movie was maybe about 20 minutes in, when they come across this pool scene and the Baron like calls for his assistant, and his assistant kind of Roadrunner style immediately runs super
Played
fast.
by Eric Idle.
Yeah, and that to me brought the element of the absurd into the film, and that's kind of when it caught my attention and it picked up a little bit. And there's a great part where he makes a bet with a king,
The Sultan.
Yeah, the Sultan, the ruler, and it's just silly. Like he's playing in the organ, and the organ turns around, and there's people in there being tortured every time he hits a note. And
the Sultan has written an opera called The Torturer's Apprentice that he wants to share with the Baron.
Exactly.
And to play it, he's got his own torture organ that's just people going, ooh, as he hits the different keys, because there are little spikes poking them.
And even before that, in the earlier scenes, there are these sort of subtle absurdities where you're backstage in this theater, and there's a hole in the wall where like a cannonball has gone through and there's an active fire through this hole in the wall, like that's just kind of
pumping smoke
like just
in,
happening, like this little crackling fire, like. So basically, the theater's on fire, and they're still holding a play in the middle of this.
Well, that's because they're in the age of reason, and the governor of this township is insisting that business go on as usual, even though
yeah, and so I think like that's those scenes I really enjoyed. But then some of the other ones, like the one where they're up in space, that was great. We can get more into that later on. But I felt like I was working so hard to stay engaged in each kind of intricate little vignette, little scene type thing, where maybe I would have been better served if I had like walked away for 20 minutes and then came back and digested another 20 minutes and then walked away.
Yeah.
Like it felt like they could have all been, separate. They could have been in like separate films or separate scenes in separate films, but then all formed together in one movie. It forms like a broader narrative. So I understand the storytelling aspect of that, but as a consumer, I was like, oh man, this is just like a lot to absorb, and it's zany, and I do appreciate that, but a little bit of it was lost on me, I think. But I will say that I can see how if I were to rewatch it multiple times, you'd find these lovely nuggets that you missed the first time.
And that's actually exactly what I was going to say, is that I've probably seen this movie 40 times. I had it on VHS, I had it on DVD. I've just seen this movie over and over and over again, and so I might have, I've probably forgiven a lot of those first viewing issues.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of like really interesting like story within a story, and then commentary about story and references to all this stuff. But it's true that like at a visceral level though, like even though it's lush and beautiful and imaginative, it somehow like lacks momentum. Like you'd never feel like you said
you want to feel vested, in
or you
want
to feel pushed forward,
right?
Yeah, but I always felt like at an arm's length. Like I never could totally get sucked into it, and that was kind of one of the. But interestingly enough, so I originally saw this movie in the theaters when I was 10 years old. My mom took me to see it in France. And at that time, I loved it, and I don't remember having any of these issues.
Because it was a cartoon, at that age, you're a kid. You're just like, you're not even analyzing it. You're just like, look at that guy's crazy legs.
Yeah, and like, stuff like when he's like flying on the cannonball. Like I just like thought that was like the greatest thing ever, But now now that I'm much older, like that stuff was like mildly amusing, but didn't really like do that much.
Didn't
for
grip
me.
you in the same fashion.
Yeah, and you just don't care about the characters very much, and it doesn't try to make you care very much.
Well, this was one of the first movies I can remember where they're asking you to follow this despicable character, and you're supposed to kind of invest in it. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of other movies, but at my first experience with a character where you're just like, and now that's like every good show on TV is just like, Walter White or Dexter or whatever, these despicable characters that you're supposed to get along with. But the Baron is a liar. He's a cheater. He's a
rascal,
and he's full of ego, and and all he wants is adventure and to be able to give a rose to the next beautiful lady. Mm-hmm. And we, as viewers, are actually supposed to get in through the Sarah Polly character.
She's That's what I was going to say. I
Sally
was much
Salt.
more captivated and interested
Certainly.
in her character and her plot
right.
than his.
That's our gateway into this world is through Sarah Salt.
But I think there's just so much space between the character moments that you're really like. I feel like there's just barely enough there because he's just interested in the cool set pieces and the wacky characters, and like all these meta things. Yeah. I don't think he cares enough. Like, and when I say he, I mean Terry Gilliam. I don't think he cares enough about the actual the character.
But I think again, you have to remember that I would give Terry Gilliam credit in that. He is telling the story from the Baron's perspective. Mm-hmm. And so Sally, who you are supposed to get in through as the viewer, is sidelined as well because the Baron's telling his story. And on film, you're seeing the Baron's story. And so what's playing out is, hey, this is what happened to me. There's this annoying little girl the whole time, but this was the adventure I was on. And he is full of himself, and there's that ego there. He's a hoper and a dreamer, and she's the one, like, part of the story is making sure she doesn't lose hope because that's what fuels him and pushes him forward. But
I guess it's more what I'm getting at more is just that lack of momentum. It's very like there's not that much once they establish everything. There's not that much dialogue, and like you don't even like the Baron isn't even that present in a way. It's hard to explain, but it just feels like you're just watching the pretty scenery go by for a lot of it.
Yeah, I guess maybe it's because I was inured to it by Time Bandits, which has a lot of similar
Yeah.
movement to it and a similar.
Well, it's also set up in the chapters in a
Right.
way.
Yeah, I
like
feel like those
chapters
two
as well.
movies sort of go together.
Well,
like-
that's another theory, which I think is pretty prescient, is that Time Bandits, Brazil, and Baron Munchausen make a trilogy where it's the age of man, where you have youth. Time Bandits is about a boy who joins this crew of time traveling short people to go through time and fight the devil. And then Brazil is about a man who is, Terry Gilliam says he's never read 1984 when making the movie, but it's sort of this guy dealing with his fantasies, possibly his fantasies of youth and the dreams of what he could become or could become, and within the system that's crushing him into its mold and either it will destroy him or and make him in its image, or he will break out
and fly away on
Right.
luxurious wings.
Exactly. And Gilliam gives you the idea that the hope is there, but it's still a hopeless situation. And then Munchausen is the old man who is completely in his delusion and completely in his fantasy, and that's the third age. So it's this like age of man with hope and dreams being and imagination and ideals being sort of the through story.
But yeah, no, thematically, yeah, there's that through line, but also like aesthetically, I just feel like Time Bandits and Munchausen just have a lot in common.
Yeah.
And also, I think
And they're both super zany and
Yeah.
wacky
Yeah,
and
a lot of
surreal.
surrealism and a lot of cage themes in all three of those movies too.
Yes.
There's the spherical cage in Munchausen. There's, I think, are they spheres as well in
No,
Time
they're
Bandits?
little squares that they're locked in at the
Okay,
end.
and then in the woman is kept in a square cage during the samurai fight, which is very similar to Sally's fight against death in Brazil versus Munchausen.
But despite my criticism of that it's hard to kind of get into, at the same time, it's just so like weird and different that you kind of also can't look away.
Right.
And I just kind of admire it for its just how nuts it is and how nuts it must have been to make it and all this stuff. And then just reading the trivia about it, like John pointed out, that if you look at the IMDb trivia section, which usually has like a few interesting things, this is like a huge list of like amazingly interesting stuff, and you just are like
some of the basic crazy trivia. There's a scene where they're in Vulcan's volcano in his forge, where these weird cyclops, you only can kind of notice they're cyclops if you look and see their like little weird lenses, are hanging out with Vulcan, where he's trying to convince their union to start making weapons for him again.
And he's making nuclear bombs.
Yeah, which will eventually come into play, he's
Yeah.
sure. And his wife Aphrodite is there, or Venus. Is she Venus in this one because it's Roman?
Venus, yeah.
And in the room, there's just a cow.
yeah.
And he wanted like 40 cows to like represent the cattle that are there,
With the Cyclops. Yeah.
yeah. And also, didn't he like Vulcan or Aphrodite had her cattle as her part of her
Well, that's
mythology.
the Aphrodite scene is something because
So he only got one cow. That was all he was allowed.
Because of budget.
that to me is one of the like hallmarks of just how lovely this movie is and how crafted it is. There's a scene where their means of special effects were so like crafty, and there's a lot of miniatures and
those
miniature
Cupids
sets.
are
Yeah,
the-
yeah.
Well,
and
I want to know how have we, not to completely just
Sure.
overtake what you're saying, Keith, but how have we not talked about Robin Williams' head floating on a saucer in space? Like, how about those effects? That's insane.
Yes, exactly. And that's like several different, for that whole section. There's different means cinematically that they created that. But a lot of them is they had a little miniature of his head like on strings that they were like chasing.
Yeah, that's what's so great. It's everything, so many practical effects.
Yeah.
That even at that time,
and so
you didn't see.
inspiring.
Yeah. But yeah, that scene, it's like the king when they go to the moon and visit the king and queen of the moon, and
It's not Robin Williams. It's Ray DeTuto.
right.
Credited as Ray DeTuto.
And it's this like. And that's one of the scenes that from when I saw it as a kid really stood out in my mind. But I also just thematically, like, I love it. It's like the idea is they're they can separate their heads from their bodies, and like their bodies are like their baser instincts,
Yeah,
and their heads
bodily.
are
They are after bodily urges.
yeah, and the king basically like his head, like he wants to stay away from his body.
Because all he wants to do is think about philosophy and heady things.
Yeah, and his body just wants to, screw and fart and eat.
And it has like a huge cod piece, his body, too.
Yeah, and it's just such a great, fun idea, and that sequence has a lot of energy.
So far we've talked about pretty much 3 sequences in this movie, and there's like 9 altogether.
Yeah.
And
they all have
and just
stuff
us
you could talk
discussing
about.
it must be so confusing to people. That's what's so wonderful. We're talking about when he goes to the moon and the guy's head's floating around, or when he goes into the volcano and they're building nuclear bombs.
And he throws the asparagus spear.
Yeah. So
Or when the fish swallows him.
exactly. And so Robin Williams, eventually the king of the moon, gets really mad at him because he's trying to flirt with his wife, the queen of the moon, who seems like they've had an affair in the past, chases the Baron off the moon riding a three-headed robotic
Clockwork chicken
vulture
thing, yeah.
creature
Yeah, that's
throwing
the-
giant asparagus spears at them.
That thing is so ridiculous.
And the way that they fool it is that they run in different directions, and the 2 heads try to chase them, and it rips the thing. And yeah, but anyway, I mean, this is just what's wonderful about this movie is try explaining that. There's no way,
Well,
and we
it's-
haven't even gotten into the fact that he's got 3 buddies. No, four companions. One has like the most amazing eyesight and can shoot halfway
And
across
has to
the
wear,
world with
and
a
they
gun.
all have impediments. So he wears
Right.
he wears glasses so that he can't see,
Right.
he can't see as far. So he can like make
So the-
out details a mile away.
Right.
So then he takes them off and you can see even further.
Right. And then there's I'm forgetting the names. I wish I
Well,
remember.
Berthold.
Yeah,
is
Berthold is the runner, Eric Idle.
And he wears giant like barbell weights, like ball and chains on
that
his
he
legs.
yeah. And later on, when he loses his memory, he thinks he must be a criminal because he's got bars on his
Yeah.
legs. But anyway, I mean, these are the things that make me love this movie. It's just the weirdest thing, and I love that it was made, and that Terry Gilliam and Michael McEwen were like, yeah, and then he chases him off the moon in on a 3-headed turkey creature that's mechanical, and he tries to throw giant asparagus spears at them, and that's all before he lands in the into the giant volcano and meets a Greek god or Roman god. It's just like
It's
weird.
Yeah, it's a tall tale.
Yeah.
But what's fun also, like in a more meta way, it's just that the making of the movie itself is also that.
Is a story, of just adversity and adventure and tall tales.
Yeah.
And maybe
but-
that might get us into why, like, how did this crazy movie fail so hard?
Well, I'm almost like, I'm sort of not surprised that financially
Yeah.
it failed, but I'm also, I still think it could have done better. Like, there's definitely, I think it's similar to The Iron Giant, where the distribution company, Columbia, just didn't believe in it. And actually, I just read on the trivia that it's like exactly the scenario I described, where the studio, basically there was a changing of the guards. It says Columbia Pictures opened this. I lost it. Anyways, that there was a changing of the guard at Columbia Pictures, and they just didn't want to champion somebody else's movie.
And more importantly, they didn't want the predecessors to have a success.
Yeah.
So they didn't
Sure.
want the person they replaced to succeed under them, or the not just an individual, but the whole new changing of the guard didn't want the previous movies to succeed. So they were undercutting those projects.
Yeah. I still think that by spending that much money on it, like, they were going to have a tough time making their money back, even with better distribution and marketing. I think they still would have struggled, but just because it's so weird.
And long. It's a 2+
long.
hour,
Yeah.
2:10.
But
especially at that time, that was considered very long.
But it reminds me of the fact that, Terry Gilliam also tried to make a Don Quixote movie.
Yeah.
And that there's a documentary about him trying to make this movie that's
Just failing.
where he was just once again like setting off to,
Lost in La Mancha is the name of that documentary.
yeah, where once again he was trying to make this crazy movie in a and just making things very difficult for himself. Like he's just a very driven man. I mean,
it's surprising he ever made a movie after even just Brazil.
Yeah,
because they kept not making
it.
They kept not making any money, and they kept people still consider them to be brilliant movies and well acclaimed, but I love that he kept making movies, but I find it surprising that people continued to take chances on him.
It sort of warms my heart that there's people out there willing to give a crazy guy millions of dollars. Like that still goes on today. I mean, I think maybe not. Certainly when the economic times are good, there's more of that going on. But I still like that.
I mean, all right. So in our current climate politically, how many millions of dollars are people pouring into Ben Carson? Honestly, if you wanted to be just have your mark on cinematic history, Terry Gilliam is not a bad guy to bet on, even for a failure, to be like. I had a piece of this crazy man's crazy vision that didn't go off, and that's a story in and of itself.
Well, I think even more after watching the movie and this discussion and looking at all the trivia and Terry Gilliam, I mean, I should have expected this type of film from him. I don't think I expected it to go this deep into the zany, which is a mistake on my part. But I think that's part of the fun and the beauty and the crazy, and it's almost more enjoyable for me to laugh about it with you guys than the experience of actually watching it the first time myself.
Mm-hmm.
I think too that definitely has something to do with it, because I think we used to watch this back at the old house in Boston, and it was just this movie's on, let's just watch it and eat some supper and drink some beers. That is just a really weird movie to have on. We always had a bunch of movies like that playing in rotation. So yeah, I can see that definitely enhanced the experience, in my opinion.
It's so visually
but
rich,
I guess
too,
we didn't even really get into this. Terry Gilliam is one of the original Monty Python guys.
I didn't even the American
guy in Monty Python
and the animator,
and he was kind of the visual anchor of it. And
he directed their first couple of movies, the Monty Python movies.
Well, I think they all just directed different segments of a lot of them. I don't think he directed in The Meaning of Life. He directed the one where the old men became pirates along the seas of finance.
But I think he was the director in terms of running the crew and he was kind of wearing the filmmaker
Is that true?
hat.
Okay, because I thought that Terry, not Terry Jones, but the other Terry, directed Life of Brian.
Yeah.
Well, maybe so.
And
maybe so.
Yeah, he definitely. did. I'm blanking on his name, which is terrible. But
there are three Terrys.
Dark hair.
Yeah. No, not Terry. That's Terry Jones. The other, Graham Chapman. Sorry, Graham Chapman. I think directed.
I think it was Terry Jones.
Oh, maybe right.
We'll never know.
There's no way of
you
knowing.
guys arm wrestle?
There's absolutely no way of knowing this
with my Wi-Fi off.
So Terry Gilliam directed some.
Terry Jones directed Life of Brian.
Okay.
Thank you, Jules.
But Terry Gilliam would direct the more super surreal parts of their features afterwards. Meaning of Life, he did this really, really odd movie about these old men that were in an insurance company that became these weird pirates that sailed their building across the Atlantic to attack financial institutions in New York, and then abruptly fell off the edge of the earth. It's just that's where he started. So there should be no surprise that we end up at these weird Baron Munchausen parts mid in the middle of his career.
So what was the last movie he made that's out?
He's made a lot of movies.
The Zero Theorem is what I see.
Oh, right.
Yeah, but what was the one before that about the field? Something Bones or Field?
The Imaginarium of Dr. Panarsis. That was Heath Ledger's last picture.
But no, there was one after that had the guy had Jeff Bridges in it, and it was about something in the field or in the.
I don't see that.
It's been a while since I actually need to catch up on my modern Terry Gilliam pictures. But I watched the heck out of a lot of his earlier movies.
Now the feature film. There's the Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus, and then after that, it's the Zero Theorem. There was nothing in between.
Zero Theorem was a sci-fi movie. Was it?
Oh, Tideland was the one I was thinking of. I guess
John
that was
Malkovich.
before. That was before.
Yeah, Dr. Parnassus.
Yeah.
Was it John Malkovich in Zero Theorem? Going deep. Everyone's
Yeah.
searching for information.
No, that was Christopher Waltz.
Okay.
To take it back to a
Christopher.
stupid level, after I watched this movie, all I kept thinking in my head for weeks was like, oh, there's the Baron. Where's the Baron? I'm the Baron. Like, they say Baron 50,000 times in this movie, and like, they'll lose him for like a second. Where's the Baron?
Yeah.
Oh, the Baron's here.
Remember, there's a when one of them is an old man, he speaks like this. He goes, "The Baron."
I was like, we get it. Yeah.
If you want to see Terry Gilliam in the movie, he's in The Fish playing the what is that called? The
Concertina.
Concertina. Yep. The squeeze box.
Or you could just watch Monty Python because he's in a bunch of those scenes.
And the Holy Grail, he's the coconut.
Yeah. He's
that's
coconut
true.
man.
the squire.
Yeah.
Born in Minnesota. I want to
Yep.
get that in there. That's where I'm from.
Yeah.
And
Let's go to England.
so we've done just a terrible job at describing this movie, but if you watch it, you'll realize that we did as best as anyone probably could. Maybe, I don't know. I guess people could do a better job, but
I don't know.
but did anybody have any kind of like gut reactions to any of this? I know Katherine was giving us some good some of her initial thoughts about. Would you recommend this to people?
It was a mixed bag for me. If you're in the mood, I feel like you got to be in the mood for this type of flick,
Yeah.
and you got to be willing to ingest it, or at least have a pep talk with yourself. Like what your attention level is going to
You
be.
can also just watch it in segments,
Yeah,
Right.
that's
like
true.
just like one a chapter a night kind of thing. I think would be a nice way to watch it. Or you can also just kind of have it like background playing and a few times. you
Right.
know?
I think it's a good, like, if you're in a position where, you're going to be making a big meal, like you're cooking Thanksgiving dinner or something.
There you go.
You just have Munchausen on there on the side, and it's...
Yeah, and
it'll-
every
it'll
time you turn
carry-
at the screen, you're like, what?
What's happening?
Well, it kind of, especially if you've seen it before, that helps. But it carries along. All the set pieces are beautiful. There's often something funny or weird happening.
It's stimulating on a lot of
there's
levels.
There's a lot going on at any given point in time, and I think that makes it enjoyable. So maybe it's a rainy afternoon, sit down. I can see where it could be hard to build up the juice to go out and like watch it, but if you're a fan of cinema, it's definitely one to catch.
For sure.
Yeah, and it's just I think it's better in retrospect than while you're watching it. For me, that's how I feel. Like the more I talk and think about it, the more fondly I remember it. But yet, while I was watching it, I was kind of like, huh.
That's exactly how I feel in this moment.
Also, for just great cameos, Uma Thurman, who was her first acting role.
Yeah, it was
That's what
more than a
we've learned.
cameo, but
She's
yeah.
like 19 in this movie.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
Very young.
And it was
Sarah Polley's first movie.
It wasn't her debut because it came out so much later than what it
Because it took so long to make.
But it came out the same year she was in Dangerous Liaison with John Malkovich.
Wow, you love John Malkovich.
I do. I like that Dangerous Liaison story as well.
I never saw that movie.
Great.
You probably saw
here's an
it.
interesting tidbit that I actually knew. I'm not looking on my phone or nothing. So the the character, the original Baron Munchausen that they made these books about, was so associated with lying that there's an actual medical condition called Munchausen by proxy, where if you're
That's from him?
It's actually
Yeah.
two. Well, it's Munchausen and then Munchausen by proxy. It's two
Whoa.
conditions.
what is Munchausen then?
So Munchausen is feigning illness or making yourself ill.
oh,
or going,
and Munchausen by proxy is doing that to your child,
Right.
affecting your child.
Right.
Okay.
So the idea is you are feigning illness or putting yourself through unnecessary
get
surgeries
attention.
to gain attention, like shaving your head and making yourself sick, telling people you have cancer, and putting up fake websites where people will send you gifts and stuff. Like there are people
I didn't
who do
know
that.
what that was called.
And then
There you go.
if you do that, if you put your child through
If
unnecessary
you poison
illness
your kid to make
Right.
them seem like they're sick
Right.
so that you get the sympathy,
put them
that's
through
called
unnecessary
Munchausen
surgeries.
by
By
proxy.
proxy.
yeah.
So in the movie Sixth Sense, when the mom At the end, when it turns out that the mom poisoned the daughter, it's because she had Munchausen by proxy.
Yep.
That's a great fun fact.
Yeah.
What a fun fact.
Yeah. What a fun fact. We finally know what I do to my kid and why.
Hello, social services.
But I would say I would recommend almost any Terry Gilliam movie just to see his mind works in beautiful ways.
Yeah,
I love it.
If you're gonna watch any, I would watch Brazil. Maybe I really think
to start. I would still recommend Baron Munchausen to start off. But I mean, if you want something easy to digest, the Brothers Grimm is one that he did.
Yeah.
The Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. A lot of people like that.
That's a
there's
really good one. I still lean towards Brazil. Such a good movie.
Yeah.
So yes, Baron Munchausen was a real guy. In Rudolf Erich Raspe was the guy who wrote the original book based on tales that he had heard
that
from
he
around
had
time.
collected. Yeah.
And one thing I heard that was, even though he was known for his tall tales, he wasn't known as a liar. The Baron. He was known as someone who told these tales without any sort of sense of lying, but what it did was highlight other people's telling tales about them. It's very weird. Like, this is a guy who everyone enjoys his stories, and he just tells his fantastic stories, but his stories more highlight when other people take their lies seriously. Very weird way of reading someone who is known, and people in nobles would travel to the court of this this German baron to hear his tales of his war. He was a soldier in the Russo-Turkish War.
Okay.
So when Russia was fighting Turkey with Austria's help.
The Ottoman Turks?
Yeah, in the 1930s. Yeah.
No.
Yeah, 1935 to 1939 was that. That was when he was
that long
engaged.
No.
1917. 1735.
Okay,
to
thank you.
1739. I was mixing up my teens.
Yeah.
I wanted him to be older.
But anyway,
And with that,
Yeah.
yep. And
One last thing.
Yes.
This movie was a failure in financially budget-wise because it was already $2.2 million over budget before they even shot a frame of film.
Yeah, I think I have an interesting stat here. If you bear with me just a second.
do you have the numbers on what it costs?
Yes,
to
I
make
do
it?
have
Yeah,
And
that would
then
be great.
46
and
million.
what it
Yeah,
added.
Although
it cost $46.6 million and made $8 million.
the budget was originally 23 million, and it grew to a reported 46 million. Although Terry Gilliam denies that.
Yeah.
He said it was far less than 40 million.
All I'll say is
Wikipedia doesn't lie.
every dollar's on the screen. Every dollar. Every dollar spent.
But yeah.
Sting don't come free.
Although Robin Williams came free.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah?
He did it for no money and no credit. That's why.
Why did he do it for free? Just
Because they had run out of money, and he was like, "Sure, I'll do it." That's why originally it wasn't going to be him,
love
but he
him.
was willing to do
And
it.
he
for free.
he flew in like a 10-hour flight, hopped right off, and got into the set. And
way
just
to
did the
go.
role.
Way to go,
And
Robin
he ad-libbed
Williams.
a big portion
Yeah.
of that scene, right?
And guess what? He got a great role in the movie Fisher King, which came out later that Terry Gilliam made. That is, and he did a great job in it. It's a
another really good
wonderful
one.
movie. Yeah.
So, Keith, where can people watch The Baron Munchausen?
I don't
At
know.
Keith's apartment.
Yeah, the internet.
Monday,
you-
Tuesday, Wednesday.
You can get it. You can buy it or rent it on iTunes. 'Cause
Yep.
That's how I saw it.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
And I bet you it's on Netflix. They have a bunch
It's
of.
through their DVD
Yeah.
program. Unfortunately, it's not streaming right now.
Oh,
on
okay.
Netflix.
There you go. So, but it is streaming on iTunes,
Yeah.
as Jules pointed out.
Nice. So, Keith, thanks for bringing The Baron Munchausen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry.
Good pick.
I guess it's a little confusing as I kind of think about the things we said. It just doesn't make any sense. But
Well,
I think
maybe
we went
that's
off on a
intriguing.
couple
Maybe it's an
tangents we
accurate
never.
portrayal.
Yeah, I think we started some thoughts we never finished, but I don't know. I just think that you should see the movie. It's really interesting, and if you don't like it, just watch something else.
Go F yourself, is what Keith's
No.
trying to say.
No, people are entitled to not like this movie. Trust me, it's a weird one.
But they just have to watch it. That's
Yeah.
all.
I think so. Yeah, why not? You're gonna watch Ninja Turtles? Watch this instead.
Or watch them both
Touche.
simultaneously.
or Emily Owens, MD.
Yeah. Well, I that's definitely worth watching.
Well, I mean, once you're done with that, because
Yeah.
they're only 12 episodes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
right. Well, thanks, Keith.
Hey, my pleasure.
Life is rather like a game. It's important that you win. And though it seems a terrible shame if you lie and cheat and sin, play up and win the game and never count the cost. It matters not how you play the frame, as long as you haven't lost.
Such a question, there are many possible answers, such as hard work.
Feel I'm alone in this whole of existence. I know it takes time, but I'm losing my persistence. The distance is too far.
And so we're going to come up with a new theme for next week.
Yeah, so we'll figure out our next week's theme. I'll put it up on our website.
Or next time. Might not be next week, right? Or will it be
We'll do it next week.
Okay, good.
Next week, we'll have a new theme. We'll put up a teaser to that on the website, newtoyoushow.com. You can suggest themes to us or leave us comments or your thoughts on our show or the subject of the day on Twitter at newtoyoushow. You can find me, John, on Twitter at Lord Joho.
And you can Twitter him. You can tweet him with all kinds of thoughts and stuff.
Yeah,
and he'll respond.
If you have any.
Yeah, you do. You're smart. Don't listen to him. You're smart. Go ahead and tweet him. Tell him how smart you are.
You got nothing.
You can see any of my artwork and stuff on earthlingkeith.tumblr.com.
Or find him on Twitter at Baron. The
Baron! Where's the Baron?
That is Baron.
And you can tweet at me on Twitter at Beautiful Jules. And how about you, Katherine?
You can check out my deets on my website, katherinescipione.com.
And it's SCI, not SKI.
That's right, Keith.
Yeah.
SCIPIONI.
And what's that Instagram again?
K-Skip.
K-Skip with a C, though.
Well,
No, with a K. The K is not a C.
And there's one start that wasn't false. It was Katherine's appearance on the podcast.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining
Hey!
us.
Yeah.
Super nice, making you stay up late to record
Yeah.
and everything.
Thanks, gentlemen.
It's good to have a little feminine,
Estrogen.
a little feminine opinions up in here a little bit.
Since Keith kicked Mary off.
Oh, man.
Well, that's the way it is.
It was fun.
She can't beat me in arm wrestling. It's
Yeah.
It's the way it is.
I haven't yet. But
We
I
don't
get
have
a
enough
pass.
microphones.
So if you want to follow us, you should check us out on iTunes. Subscribe through iTunes, your favorite podcast app. We're also going to be and should already be on the Google Play Store. They're opening up their podcast hosting or podcast feeds soon.
Neat.
So we've already applied for New to You Show and been approved. So you'll find us there. You should rate, review, leave us positive reviews on Google or on iTunes so we can get more exposure for the show. Share the show if you like it. And again, reach out to us, newtoyoushow.com or at newtoyoushow, and we'll follow back and say
right.
hello. So gang, it may not be new, but hopefully it was new
New
to
to
you.
you! Explosion!
About the music, this pitiful life is all about the music. This pitiful life is all about the music.
With him together forever, without the limitation of time, ever again. So the second coming of the Lord is not dead. They're two separate.